we did here at A Rude Awakening, the Jonah series. Have you watched it yet?
Never heard of it.
The deep dive into the book of Jonah.
Were you in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did, every single episode, 13 episodes, we asked people to always have two versions. And what I used actually was the NIV, I call it the Nearly Inspired version, and the JPS. Now, if there's ever a season two, those translations are gone. I'm only going to use one English translation. What's it going to be?
The Big Book.
Somebody say the Big Book.
The Big Book.
Why? Because I'm going to be able to look and see and see what the issues are. That's what I love about what he does here, is that he says that he based his translation on the best, and I want you to tell us why before we go on. Why did he say he bases it in 1853 on the best German scholarship? What was that? What was going on there?
So this is Rabbi Leeser, is his name?
Isaac Leeser.
Isaac Leeser. And I actually hadn't heard of him until you brought him to my attention.
And tell us again what he did, because you learned something from me. Come on, so what did he do?
So he is the first one to translate. He did a lot of things. Actually wrote dozens of books.
Dozens of books.
And he came to the U.S. at a time when there were no rabbis who were trained in the U.S. If you were a rabbi, you were trained in Germany.
That's right.
Because that's where Jewish scholarship, and it's kind of hard
it's
hard to believe with what happened 100 years later, but the center of Jewish scholarship in the entire world was in Germany. And also the center of biblical scholarship, of non-Jewish scholarship, was in Germany. And so much so that when I studied at Hebrew University in the 1990s, they used to have a joke. And the joke was that the earliest Semitic language is German. And what they meant by that is all of the great scholarship written on Semitic languages is in German. I had to take Germanit Lamatchilim, German for beginners. And to get my master's, that was for my BA, I had to take Germanit Lamitkadmim, German for advanced German. And because you couldn't have a degree in biblical studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem without advanced German. The other joke is that Hebrew University was the last surviving German university in the world. And what they meant by that is a lot of the people who established the university were refugees from Germany, from Europe, bringing over the German system of meticulous scholarship. And whatever you say about the Germans, they have a culture of meticulousness. So yeah, so
he goes back
that's
to
what
say
he means by that.
So he's saying, I'm bringing the best scholarship from Germany to help me in this translation into English. Again, the first translation for Jewish people who only read English. And he said, listen, you're only reading the King James Version. And I want you to be able to read from a Hebrew base, but based on the scholarship that was in Germany. So again, 1853, real quick, Nehemia. And I'm throwing all kinds of softballs at you. But what was happening at that time? I mean, in around that time, in the middle 1800s.
Did you ever see the movie The Frisco Kid?
You know what? I can tell you something great about you, Dr. Gordon.
What's that?
I try my best to catch you off, and I can't catch you off ever. You've got a story for everything, you know, and actually there's this and there's that. So tell me about the 1853
So
and the Frisco
it's
Kid.
a beautiful movie, The Frisco Kid, and it's about this rabbi in Lithuania who goes over to San Francisco at a time when there's this burgeoning Jewish community, and they don't have any rabbis, because there are no rabbis, there are no natively trained rabbis in the United States. So they bring him over from Lithuania, and it's his adventures traveling across the United States and through the Wild West in many cases. And so why is it set in that period? It's actually set in around 1848, 1849, because what happened was the gold rush. And people start flooding to California, flooding into the United States, flooding over from Europe. There's all kinds of persecutions of Jews happening in Europe. And all of a sudden you have Jews who are coming over to the United States. There had been Jews before, but they start coming in massive numbers, to where by 1875, they had to establish the first Jewish seminary for rabbis in the United States, which was in, of all places, Cincinnati. And why Cincinnati? Because at the time, Cincinnati was the industrial center of the world. certainly outside of England. It was
Right.
the industrial center of the world, and a lot of Jews were involved in that. A lot of Jews were involved in the gold rush. And so 1853, this rabbi is realizing, okay, it's not just like, a few hundred merchants who are based in different cities around the U.S., which had been the case, right? You had Jews who were in New York and in Charleston, South Carolina, but it was in the hundreds. Now, all of a sudden, you get thousands of tens of thousands of Jews who are flooding into the United States to the point where there are famous stories that during the American Civil War, you had Yiddish-speaking regiments and why Yiddish? Because that was the language of the Jews of Eastern Europe. And they were so fresh off the boat when they arrived in Kansas, they were speaking to each other in Yiddish as they were fighting in the Civil War. So you have these massive numbers of Jews who start to come over. The really big numbers begin in 1880. But already by this time, you have a lot of Jews. And the problem is, if you're a Jew in the United States, what Bible can you read? Well, the King James Version. That's what's available.
That's it.
And he's saying we Jews should have our own translation based on the most advanced and knowledgeable scholarship of our time, which was the scholarship of Jews and non-Jews in Germany.